Welcome everyone to another Unreal Engine tutorial. Today we will be looking at the importing of static and skeletal meshes from 3D modeling programs. We are going to briefly look at the importing of meshes from 3ds Max, and we're going to take a bit of a more in-depth look into importing meshes from Blender, seeing as the import options are a bit more complex than that of 3ds Max. So as you can see, we just have our blank template over here, which we're going to use to import our meshes. Now first, what I'd like to draw your attention to is obviously the import button. If you look at the types of file formats that are supported here, you can see that most of them deal with the FBX file format. So that is what we're going to be looking at today. It's mostly going to be FBX exporting from your 3D modeling programs. We can also see here that we have the option to import an asset pack or a UPack file. This also extends to a UAsset file, and we'll go through that later when we migrate assets from other projects. If you look at the All Files slot over here, you can see that we also have the option to import an OBJ file. Now an FBX and an OBJ files are probably the two most common types of static or skeletal meshes. So that is what we're going to be doing today. So first of all, I'm just going to go into 3ds Max. And as you can see, we have this tree static mesh. Now, as I said, we're just going to briefly look at 3ds Max because it's got quite a nice, well laid out, simple export system. So all we have to do is go to File, Export, Export. Now we can save this as tree or whatever you'd like. And then this dialog box pops up. Now all we need to make sure is that we have smoothing groups enabled, and this mesh doesn't have any textures applied to it, but if it does and you would like to have those applied inside the Unreal Engine, you have to just tick Embed Media. So now what we are going to do is make sure that this is set to any of these from about 2013 to 2016 is okay. Obviously, we'd like to keep it as current as possible, so we're just going to hit OK. And that is that. Very, very simple. So we're going to go back into Unreal over here, hit Import, and import our tree mesh. Now this dialog box will pop up with our import options. We are going to go through this in more detail when we go through our Blender section, but for now all you have to do is hit Import. Now you can see that our mesh has been added over here, and it also by default creates a material for that mesh. So what we're going to do is just drag this into our scene, and we can now see it looks pretty much exactly the same as we had it in 3ds Max. So that is a win for us right now. Okay, now we are going to look at exporting from Blender and some of the common types of errors that can appear when this happens. So I'm just going to open up Blender and open up a static mesh so you can see what I'm talking about. Now we have Blender opened up, and we're just going to go through some of the common types of errors that you might get and why they happen. Now this is Blender version 2.79. As far as I know, 2.80 has been released, so it might be a good idea just to keep up to date with that, just so that you get used to the different changes that may happen because of this. Okay, so without further ado, we are going to import this mesh to Unreal. So we're going to just go to File, Export. Now, as I said before, you have the option to either go to FBX or OBJ, as these are the ones that Unreal can import. For now, we're just going to go to the FBX export option. And now this is our Export FBX dialog box. So as you can see over here, we have quite a few options to go through. Now, you can see that over here we have these different options. This is just a static mesh. It does not have any armature or skeleton. There are no cameras or lamps that we want to export with this FBX file. So we're just going to click on Mesh. These you can all keep the same. Note that there's a selected objects option, so that if you want to only select one or two objects within inside your scene and export those, that is what you have to do. So now we have these different options of geometry, armatures, and animation. We don't have any animations over here, so you can untick that option, but at the moment it will not even try to export any animations because there are none. So we are just going to save this. And we can call this dumpster. Now that that is done, we can import it as we did before. Okay, we will have a look at these settings in a second. Now you can see, when I try and import this on our message log, it says no smoothing group information was found in this FBX scene. This is because when I was inside Blender over here, I went to Export and FBX. And when you go to geometries over here, you can see that smoothing is applied to normals only. In order for that error to not pop up in Unreal, we need to click on this and change the smoothing to face. And now when we export this FBX and go back over here, we don't have to re-import this again. All we have to do is right click on the asset and say re-import. And now you can see when we do that, we have no error messages, and our dumpster, which is very big, does appear. All right. I'm just going to, we'll leave those two for now. Now we're going to go through another type of common error that you might get when importing your meshes. Next, we are going to look at an error which is called a degenerate tangent bases. So I'm just going to show you how that would occur inside your modeling program. So if I was for example create this cube, this sphere, this cylinder, and then if I was to simply join all of them together, that now if I tried to export this as an FBX, you can see that my smoothing is still set to face. We're going to set this to shape mesh, and we can import this. If I try and import this now, however, you can see that we have the error that says it has degenerate tangent bases, and it also has nearly 0 binormals. This is because inside our 3D modeling program, we did not correctly UV unwrap the mesh. If I were to go into edit mode, and here inside our UV editor, you can see that we have no UVs. So the engine doesn't know how to calculate shadowing and light map resolution and things like that because we have no UV. Now, if you were designing something properly, you would have to create seams and stitches on your mesh so that it could be properly UV unwrapped. However, for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm just going to use a smart UV project. And you can see that we now have a UV map. So I'm going to export this again, this time as shape mesh 1 so that we can see the difference. So now when I import this, you can see that we now have no errors popping up. Okay, we've now gone through all the errors which you can possibly or commonly get inside the engine when importing meshes. So now hopefully you know how to avoid those. And now we'll go over the various settings that you get when importing a mesh. So I'm just going to import I'm just going to delete this tree quickly. And I'm just going to import it again so we can walk through this import options box. Now, most of these are very self-explanatory. If you would like your mesh to be scaled or translated or rotated before importing it inside your scene, you can do that. You can make it so that it is a uniformly scaled bigger or smaller mesh. You can also rotate this or translate this before it is even imported. But I would not recommend this because you don't really have a good sense of how this will look before it is actually imported. These miscellaneous settings you don't have to worry too much about. The LOD or level of detail settings will make it so that the mesh will automatically calculate its level of detail. So for every mesh that you import into the engine, it will calculate various levels of detail so that as you get closer or further from your mesh, it will change this level of detail. So as you are very close to the mesh that you imported, it will be exactly as it is in your 3D modeling program with all the faces present. As you back away from it, you'll see that it will start to lose some detail and will not look as clear as inside your 3D modeling program. That is because of the level of detail. Then you also have the option to apply a material to your mesh before it is even imported. As you have seen, all of these materials have been automatically created when you import the mesh. That is because we have this import materials and import textures option. So what you could do to make your life a bit easier, if you have textures or materials already set up for your mesh, is you could set them up in the engine before you import the mesh, and then you have the option to apply them so that your textures are already applied before you even import. That is all the really necessary settings that you might need until we get to a skeletal mesh over here. So for example, if I wanted to apply let's just say a base color to our tree, now it has imported that tree with this material already applied. We are quickly going to go over the Obj Mtl formats quickly, and I will show you what those mean. Okay, so if we are to import an OBJ, now you can't see it over here, but if you look inside my content browser over here, you can see that I actually have an OBJ and an MTL file over here. So basically what that means is that the MTL file tells the OBJ how to recreate its materials. So if I was to import this OBJ file over here, we don't want that. If I import that, you can see that we have this error again, but you know how to solve that by now. You can see that this static mesh is some type of character, and you can see that because you have to deal with clothing, hair, face, teeth, arm, eyes, textures, you can see that a lot of these have been imported, and that is because of the MTL file. If we were to go back into our files and to delete that MTL file, the OBJ file would have no idea how to recreate those materials. So that is exactly what I'm going to do just for demonstration purposes. So I'm just going to delete all of these as well as him. I'm just going to delete those. Now, if I go here, delete the MTL file, and then if I were to come back here and import, You can now see that now that I imported this without the MTL file associated with the OBJ, we only got the one default material. So it is important, especially when you are downloading free assets from the internet or whatever it may be, that you have an associated MTL file with your OBJ. If you are making an OBJ yourself, your 3D modeling program will automatically make an MTL file and associate it with your OBJ. Now, before we look at the migration of assets from one project to another, especially within Unreal, we are going to look at the importing of skeletal meshes. Okay, you can now see that we have this skeletal mesh, which I got from Mixamo, obviously because of a few differences between their skeletal meshes and ours. We have a few funny things going on over here. But you can see that it does have an animation attached to it. So we're going to go through how this can be imported into Unreal. So we're going to go File, Export, FBX, same as normal. Only now, when we go to our main, we are going to hit Armature as well as Mesh. If we go to here, you can see that all is in order. We do not need to tick only deform bones. When we go to animation, we do want our animation. So we are going to call this mannequin, I guess. Now inside Unreal, when we import our mannequin, we can now see that skeletal mesh was automatically ticked because of the fact that we did it inside Blender. Now, the fact that this skeleton says none does not mean that there is no skeleton attached. It simply means that it is using the skeleton that was set as default inside Blender. If we wanted to, and if the skeleton was similar enough, we could choose one of these other skeletons. But in this case, we are not going to do that. We are just going to hit import. Okay, now that is done, your shaders start to compile. Now we have a skeletal mesh which has been imported, as well as the physics asset and skeleton, which were automatically imported with the skeletal mesh, as well as the textures for this specific mesh. Now you'll notice that the animation we had inside Blender is actually not here. I think that's because of a mistake I made. So we're just going to, let's delete these. Okay, so we're just going to import this mannequin again quickly. And you can see that entirely my fault. I really do apologize. Last time when I imported the skeleton mesh, I did not check import animations. This is obviously preference. You may need the animations from your 3D modeling program, or you might not. You might just want the skeleton itself. But either way, you just need to check or uncheck import animations. Now that this is done importing, you can see we have pretty much the same setup as last time, except now we also have this animation that is present. So if we rotate him and press play, now that we've pressed play, you can see that that animation will play. Okay, so we now have a very good grasp of how to import all these different skeletal and static meshes. We know how to fix all the errors that may occur, and we also know about the OBJ and MTL file relationships. The last thing we're going to do is we are going to migrate UAsset files from another project to our own. So if you'll just bear with me while I open up another Unreal Engine project file, and then I will show you how to migrate. Okay, I've now opened up this mountain landscape map that is sort of a freebie from Unreal, and we are going to quickly look at how to migrate meshes from one project to another. So for example, I might decide that I like the look of this tree, so now you would just have to find this mesh inside your content browser, right click, go to Asset Actions, and now you either have the option to export the selected asset, in which case you will create an FBX file this, and it will allow you to take this inside your 3D modeling program and you can change it up as you would like, or you have the option to migrate this asset, which will take this asset directly from this project to another Unreal project. And the nice thing about the migrate function is that it will automatically take all the materials and textures associated with this mesh and migrate those as well. So if all you want to do is simply move an asset from one project to another, this migration is a lot easier than exporting it as an FBX and re-importing it inside your other project. Now we're going to hit OK. Then you have to just choose a directory to migrate these to. It is recommended for most migration operations that you migrate it to the content folder of your project. So I'm just going to select that. And now our content migration has completed successfully. And you can see when I go back to my other project over here, we now have a new folder called Assets, where our pine tree now is. So now, after a brief stage of shaders compiling, you now have your pine tree inside your level. So today we have gone through the importing of meshes from 3D modeling programs, both static and skeletal, and just some simple errors just to fix in case you need to, and the migration of meshes and assets from other project files. So I hope you've learned something today. I hope this makes your life a bit easier when you are designing your own levels and scenes. So if you have learned something today, if you've liked what you've seen and you would like to see more from us, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one.